Ballet Bird is a streaming site designed by former Pacific Northwest Ballet principal dancer Julie Tobiasen. Ballet Bird offers ballet classes for anyone at any level of training that you can do from the comfort of your home or studio. After many years performing as a professional ballerina and decades of teaching at all levels of ballet, Julie is excited to offer her training for more people like you. Classes are designed for large and small spaces and for all levels. The low monthly membership fee is less than one in-person class and is accessible 24/7 with new classes added every month. Ballet Bird is a great addition to your regular in-studio training as well. Take advantage of the 10-day free trial and use the discount code COD25 to get 25% off through June 30th, 2023 at balletbird.com. Whether you are just starting your ballet journey today or you're a seasoned professional, Ballet Bird is the place for you. Visit balletbird.com or click the link in the show notes.
I'm Rebecca King-Ferraro.
And I'm Michael Sean Breeden, and you're listening to Conversations on Dance. Hey everyone, since we've become a member of the ACAST podcasting community, we've been having a blast re-releasing older episodes of Conversations on Dance. We hope you've been enjoying them as much as we have. Today we are restoring our interview with the legendary Balanchine ballerina Patricia McBride to our feed, and if you missed it the first time, now is the perfect time to catch up. Patty, as she is affectionately referred to by her many fans, peers, and students, tells us some truly memorable stories about a legendary time for dance in America with her signature radiance and charm. We hope you enjoy.
This episode was recorded in 2016 while Michael and I were still both dancing with Miami City Ballet and Patricia was in town working with the company.
We are so lucky to have Patricia McBride, one of the most beloved dancers of the 20th century at the New York City Ballet, with us today. So thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me. This is so much fun.
So let's just get right into it then. Could you tell us a little bit about your dance training and when you first encountered Balanchine?
Yes. Well, I started in a tiny little local school in Teaneck, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And when I was about 12 years old, my teacher that I just loved, Ruth Vernon, she taught ballet, tap, and acrobatics, and I took all three when I was 7 with her. And when I was 12, she asked me if I wanted to be a professional dancer. And at that point, I had never seen a professional ballet company, and I didn't know what it was, but I said yes. And then I went to a local a school in New York City. My mom took me there, and I had a Russian teacher. And while I was there for 8 months, because while I was there, a mother or a friend was sitting next to my mom, and they said, "You look like a Balanchine dancer." And my mom said, "Who is he?" We had no idea. Amazing. And so my mom sort of felt it was important that I experience this George Balanchine. So we went to the performance, and that was it. I saw the serenade. The curtain went up with those extraordinary dancers. Mm-hmm. I was 13 and going to New York. Mm-hmm. And to Sonia Dobrovinskaya. Mm-hmm. And from there, I auditioned, and I believe I went to a summer course. And then I was accepted on a full scholarship because my mom could not have afforded to give me those classes. So that's when I was a student, and I was 14 years old in the School of American Ballet, George Balanchine School, that I got my first glimpse of Mr. Balanchine. And it was a revelation just seeing him. And because the school was connected, like you hear in Miami, you could see the principal dancers. You could see Mr. Balanchine going from studio to studio, choreographing. So, and he would come and terrified us. He'd come and watch class. He'd watch Félia Dubrovska's class or Muriel Stewart or all the great teachers we had, Madame Tumkovsky. We had a lot of Russian and English. We had Muriel Stewart, who was one of Pavlova's students, and Vera Vladimirov, who danced with Anna Pavlova and was with George Balanchine at the Old Mariinsky in Russia. And Félia Dubrovska was such a beautiful inspiration, and they all were magnificent teachers. But It was so exciting to see him firsthand. I had read books, and by that time I had seen lots of his ballets.
Sure.
And I was dreaming about, because everyone wanted to join the company. Mm-hmm. And, you didn't know if you had talent, or nobody would tell you anything that you were talented, or you just never knew. Uh-huh. So then I apprenticed, when I was 15 or something, or 16, I apprenticed, and I joined the company at 16 and stayed 30 years.
That's incredible.
And it was amazing, because I thought, here is the genius of all times, looking at him, and he was such a humble, gentleman, mm-hmm. a real gentleman who was his genius was just so obvious when you'd see him or you'd work with him. So I got to work with him from I was 16 till my whole career practically. Well, I danced maybe 6 years after with Peter Martins in the company. Right. But I stayed 30 years within the company, and I never lost that awe for him that I had the first moment I saw him, because dancing his ballets they made you the dancer you are, or you became. And I learned everything from him, because he would teach class every single day. Every day he teach us. So the theory of how he wanted you to do a glissade, or the preparation, or how you use your arms or your head or your épaulement, and plus the fast footwork or the very slowest of the slow movement. And I felt blessed all those years to have been there.
So what were your first few years like that culminated in your promotion to principal in 1961?
Well, I was so lucky, because I was 17 when he picked me out. Mm-hmm. And I had no idea. I stayed a year in the corps, and he did a ballet called The Figure in the Carpet. And I was doing little solos. He picked me out like Symphony in C. I do a demi solo, but I didn't really have the title yet. And then they promoted me when I was 17, to junior soloist. Mm-hmm. There were 3 divisions: the corps, the junior soloists, and then the principal. So when I was 17, I was doing like third movement Symphony in C with Edward Villela. So there was an inkling, but I had no idea. So I was just so shocked, but he made a solo for me, and he did the first choreography when I was 17. Wow. And this with Nicholas Magalanis, my first partner. And then I was cast. He cast me when I was 17. I did a lot with Edward Villela, one of my favorite partners, because I looked up to him as he was a great star, and I was just this young dancer looking in with open eyes at all the ballerinas at the time were so extraordinary. And you learn from all the people ahead of you. That's I was used to going to the ballet and seeing them dance. And, so he made me the dancer that I am. I became by the roles he gave me all those years. He molded my career, so to speak. And, the roles kept coming then. And then the next year I was promoted at 18. He promoted me to a principal. Mm-hmm. And then I started doing so many ballets, and all different. I wasn't molded in. I used to do a lot of fast footwork, soubrette kind of roles, and then later on I got to do many more, different kind of roles like Sonambula, or doing a lot of lyrical, but it was a mixture of many different. The Tarantella came when I was very young. Mm-hmm. A Midsummer Night's Dream, I was the original Hermia when I was 18. And
Balanchine also, he revived La Valse for you.
And La Valse.
And that was, you were the first person to do it after Tanny, right?
That's right. That's right. How did you know that?
These things, they stick. So,
yes.
So he was, and you were very young when he revived it for you. So he was obviously seeing you, in many different ways. And I love that you brought up Edward, of course, because we worked under Edward for years, and he's very special to us. But your partnership with him is one of the most famous in the company's history. And Balanchine did so many varied works like Harlequinade and Rubies and Tarantella. But, what about this pairing made it so successful?
Well, I think, I think we both just loved to dance. We were so passionate about it. And he'd just give me a smile and I give him a smile back. And then, because we not only did the ballets that were made directly on us by Mr. Balanchine, but we had a big repertoire there that we would dance together. And you become a partnership only by dancing a lot with a person.
Right.
And because of our size, because I was petite, I got to dance with Edward. We just seemed, people liked to see us, and I loved dancing with him. I was wonderful, and he never was nervous. And I was I kind of looked up to him because I was 17 and he was maybe 6 years older than I was. So I had such admiration, and we just laughed and had fun in rehearsal and tried to work really hard. And he would take me and do concerts outside of I did many things with him. And I feel really thankful because it made me feel even more relaxed when I dance inside of the company with him. And he would dance, he was one of the most famous dancers in America, the greatest dancers America had ever seen.
Right.
And his spirit, and I just tried to keep up with him and match his spirit, and I loved it. And he brought me here the first time to do the jewels when he staged the jewels for the company. I came, and I was the original rubies with him, and he brought Violette Verdi in, who was the original emeralds, and he brought Suzanne Farrell, who was the original diamond. So he just brought the women. And it was such a great joy because I wouldn't have had a chance to see Miami City Ballet, if I hadn't come. And it's such a wonderful experience for me to come here. That's why I'm so happy to be here. Have a lot of fun with Lourdes. It's so wonderful that she invited me.
Yeah. So I'm sure our audience, and I know that Rebecca and I would love to hear about the creation process of some of these ballets you mentioned, like Rubies and Tarantella. What was it like being in the studio creating these works?
Well, I think when you're a dancer, you just want to get inside of the body. Visually, I could see exactly what Mr. Balanchine wanted. Mr. B moved so extremely beautifully, and it was so easy, and he was so easy to work with. He never imposed anything on you. He wanted you to be yourself, which I try to do with people when I'm staging his works. I want people to be themselves. And you felt his trust in you. He would dance a whole variation, but I was always nervous that I wouldn't retain it fast enough because his speed he was such a natural choreographer. He could stage something in 45 minutes and it would be done. So it's your job to remember everything, because he would do it and then it was yours and you'd have to remember it, and you were the curator of his works. So you would have to, and so often when he'd do something, I'd ask the pianist to write a little note here and there on the musical score. He always worked with his pianist, Gordon Belsner, who is on his right side. So Gordon was always there, and they worked musically. There was no one more extraordinary than George Balanchine musically. The steps just fit the music so well. And there was no experimentation. He would dance it for you with the music. Gordon would play the piano, and he'd roll up his sleeves. He'd dance it, and you'd do it. And I was behind him, and I was always amazed at how he knew what a woman could do in point shoes. He knew what was possible. There was no experimentation because he knew it all.
Right.
And I heard, somebody told me a story about Mr. B that when he was very young in the Marinsky, he would peek in and watch the point classes, the women's classes. And he just knew, and it was never, I'm going to try something unique and have the dancers going the uncomfortable way. It was always the most comfortable way that, and the most musical, and the rate of speed. I could teach a variation in a variations class And it would be as fast as Mr. B staging a ballet for me to follow him on. And the same, he was so natural. And he used to say, I don't prepare. I come in and I take it from the dancers. But he'd come in and he would be ready. And it was done like so easy. He never lost his temper in all the years I worked for him. It was a dream working with him. I just cherished and loved, and I knew how extraordinary he was. I just wanted to please him and dance for him and have him proud of me. And I always felt, you never knew. I mean, sometimes he would, say, oh, that was very good. But you always wanted to please him and be the best you could. He never raised his voice. He never screamed. He was such a gentle man, and, it was just such an easy process. And he did many different kinds of ballets, during my whole, time with him. And it was always it was always, a great gift. I always say it's better than diamonds having a ballet made for you. You're part of the creation. And I always felt like a tool. I was his tool. And I wanted him to be proud of me and what I did. The focus was trying to do what he wanted. And, so I think every dancer felt that way who was in the company. And I just feel so blessed to have had that in my life. He's with me every day, every single day.
So I love that you brought this up. One of the things that Balanchine is sort of famous for is kind of not being, not giving a lot of heavy coaching. That you wouldn't necessarily, he was sort of
right.
Elusive in that way. But is there a specific instance of coaching? What's your favorite experience where he was working one-on-one with you in that way?
Oh, every single time. There was just such an amazing every time. I'm trying to think. There was one time, and he did it so many, and I was usually with Edward Villela. And so usually it was fast-paced, and Harlequin Nod was really beautiful. And the coaching, he worked on the coaching because it's Columbine and you have to act. But he showed me through the movement. If you just see him in action showing you how to move, it was so clear. And because the musicality was so important, I was trying to learn that. But I'd say Brahms-Schoenberg was like very different because he never asked me who I wanted to dance with ever my whole career. Maybe once for No Cracker whenever my partner was injured and there was like nobody. But in Brahms, he asked me who I wanted to dance with. And I said, oh, Mr. Balanchine, I can't do that. I can't do that. Then he kind of sniffed. He went, maybe I'll pick Conrad and not Eddie Villela, because he said it'll look different. And it was more different. He could not have choreographed that particular movement, the second movement, which was all lifts and beautiful partnering. And it was something that the partnering was really unique and special. One movement flowed to the other. But so he picked Conrad because he said it would be different, and I was dancing practically everything with Edward. And I did have other partners too, but the partnership was there. Right. And so that was very special. And he had a little problem, and he went away a week. He came back, and the movement just flowed. And I remember he asked me to do a sauté with a partner in front of me and do a sauté front. And I should land forward, but I fell back. And he said, oh, do that. That's wonderful. And it's one of the most beautiful movements that evolved. It evolved. But he wasn't, like Mr. Balanchine never forced you to do something that wasn't natural. Right. Very rarely. Well, there were a few times, but mostly of the times, he knew exactly. Right. And I always felt he cherished each and every one of us. Were all Balanchine ballerinas, but we all were so different. And the ballets, something that wasn't done in me, it suited them to a T, and he sort of, his ballets made the public see you how he wanted you to look, and I did a lot of coaching that I got from him on other ballets, that weren't made on me, that I had the opportunity. I did over 100 ballets with him, or, you know, it was a lot, and I could be thrown on, he'd throw me on, and you'd have a week. He didn't like to prepare you.
I wanted to bring this up because I went and watched this with Rebecca at the library in New York. It's probably my favorite old video from New York City Ballet in Balanchine's heyday, and it's of you and Edward in Symphony in 3 movements.
No, I never saw that.
You never?
I didn't know. I only did that a short time.
So I was wondering, did you get thrown into that? Because I think it may have been the second performance ever.
Well, that was interesting because it was made on Sarah Leland, and I loved her in it, and I never would have wanted to take it away. I would never, no, I don't know. But I learned it because she had broken and she was in a cast, so she couldn't teach me. There was no one to teach me. So we had a choreologist, Jörg Lansrein, who Mr. Balanchine brought from, he was Swiss, to do the Benish notation. So I learned that ballet, but I had seen it, and I love Sally in it. And so he taught it to me from Benish notes. So that's how I learned it. And I went into it in a flash. I didn't have a lot of time, but I did so many ballets. I've done Agon and all those other ballets that prepared me, episodes, and I learned everything really fast, and I was thrown on in like a week. Sometimes he didn't like to give you weeks to prepare. Sometimes the name would go up on the board, and I said, I don't know that. I better learn it. So then you get thrown on, and he said, you know, one day he said to me, you know, God gave you this natural talent, you know, and so he didn't want to, he just trusted, I guess, certain people he trusted to do it on their own, and he knew that I would probably find a way somehow to do it, and it was fine, and it was fun. It was fun to do, but I don't know. I hardly did. I did it one summer in Saratoga. I remember learning it.
I'm almost sure the video is from Saratoga.
I never saw it.
Well, it's at the library in New York. You should
really.
Come watch it.
Well, you know, our generation never got a chance to really see themselves.
Right.
I was horrified the first time I saw them. Oh my goodness! So it's a wonderful tool because you can correct yourself. A lot of times you don't. I didn't really get a lot of corrections, a lot of coaching. You wouldn't ever have that much time because the repertory was so vast. You know, there was so much going on that you'd have to write out a request rehearsal to put in, you know. But he always liked the challenge of seeing what you do on your own when you weren't spoon fed. So you'd be, I guess, most natural in it. But, and his trust and, you know, loving maybe the first cast of his ballets, you do it, and he was so loyal to everyone. You do it for years and years, and you got to develop and get a chance to grow in those roles on the stage. But also there is a spirituality with him, and you could feel it, and he was so prolific with the ballets he gave the world and how he changed the view of ballet. I think without Balanchine, we wouldn't have contemporary ballet at all. Yeah. You know, we wouldn't have all these. It wouldn't be in the state it's in without him.
No. Yeah.
The influences, and then the influence he had on hundreds, thousands of dancers and choreographers, and I mean, he changed. Thank goodness, you know, the fate of Lincoln Kirstein. Lincoln met him,
right? Yeah.
And that was such a fateful collision course. You know,
we might not have had dance in America, at least certainly not in the same way.
It wouldn't have looked
Lincoln and Balanchine meeting like that.
And I've read the books and how hard those times must have been, and just even performing a lot. I think also in the 1964 Lincoln Center emerged, and a lot of art centers all over America was thriving. And then we could, you know, perform so many. We had 3-month seasons, 8 performances a week, dancing a different repertoire. It was extraordinary. And Balanchine was there every single day. He would teach class. He would teach us so much. I mean, he's still with me. He'll be with me forever. trying to, and everybody thinks of a Balanchine as heartless and wrists and all that, but it's so much more than that. He didn't want zombies dancing around, just staring at themselves and stiffness. He wanted the body to move and flow, travel in space, attack. And, and all his ballets made all of the dancers of the time beautiful. And he put women on such a pedestal. It was amazing to have that. And we had just a wonderful repertory. All the ballerinas were so beautiful. I know the generation before I joined the company, I would go every night, and they were all so special in their own way. Yeah. And that's how the young generation learns from the generation ahead of them.
Exactly. And each ballerina kind of influenced the time that he was famously, in love with certain ballerinas at certain times. And that kind of influenced his style. And so how did this affect your career as he kind of went through maybe different phases with who he liked and how that changed his choreography? How did that change your career being there for 30 years?
Well, I just went ahead and I loved, I absolutely adored my repertory because I had so many different kinds of Balanchine ballets who always kept me in good shape. Theme and Variations, Piano Concerto No. 2, and all the Rubies, and, all of those. And I feel like I went through, Symphony in C, doing various movements of it, and Serenade, and, I even did Agon, and all those many things that, doing Bugaku, and very different.
Yeah,
and
then also varied. Yeah, for sure.
But we also had Jerome Robbins, and I worked a lot with Jerry too when he brought Dances at a Gathering to the company in 1969. And Who Cares was done right then, about the same, right before he started Dances, because I went from doing Who Cares with Jacques d'Amboise and Karin van Arldingen and Marnie Morris, the three of us with Jacques. And then the next thing is, Mr. Balanchine said, Jerry is good. That's why I want him to come to the company. And I had done a lot of his ballets, the Afternoon of a Faun, The Cage, when I was very, very young. And I had worked a little. Eddie and I went to his apartment. He had a brownstone with a ballet studio on top. And we worked with Jerry when we weren't in the company. But I had done, Mr. B cast me in all of Jerry's ballets. So then when Jerry came, he started the Dances at a Gathering, which became an amazing work. Did they do this here in Miami?
Here,
Isn't it great?
A few times. It's amazing.
That's wonderful.
So I was the original pink girl and Eddie was the brown boy. And so we started and then he started doing so many very, so many interesting ballets, and the work process was so different. He would give Jerry all the time he wanted to create his ballets because he was very different kind of choreographer, and he needed the time. And he would have so many different versions of the steps, A, B, C, and then you do B one day and you go back to A, and then, to figure. So it was a very different process, but they were both extraordinary. As a dancer, there was nothing. I just count my blessings every time I think of them, and they work so beautifully together.
I think I love that we were actually going to bring both of those up together to talk. No, it's perfect because I think it's, you had danced all this repertoire in the world, and, you'd done all these beautiful ballets, and then 10 years into your career or so, you get these two masterpieces that I think many people would say capture you better than any other ballets. And so you have Pink Girl, like how Jerry sees you, and then Man I Love, how Balanchine sees you. What was the creation process like for these ballets from two such different men?
Oh, so like night and day.
Yeah.
Night and day. But, and the first with Jerry, when he started Dances, he started with Edward and I, Eddie Villel and myself, and we did a pas de deux. And Mr. B came in. He invited Mr. B, came to see it. So he said, wonderful, do more. So he brought in another person. I think Kay Mazel came in. And then he asked for a few more. Violette came in. And they kept growing to be 5 women and 5 men. originally, and it was an hour long with Chopin, beautiful Chopin music. And I was enthralled with watching, and I just watched Jerry, and I was in heaven watching him at work with the dancers. But we worked 13 weeks, 5 hours a day.
I was just gonna say,
5 hours a day. It was a long process.
Wow, yeah.
And he would experiment and try different things. And we learned everything. Everybody learned everybody. And we didn't know till a week or two before what roles we would actually be doing. And the order, there was A, B, C, D, E, F, the order of the program. We tried all of these different things, but I love it because it was a really intense, very, intimate. Mm-hmm. It's a very, even Mr. B, when you're alone with the choreographer, he's partnering you. Mr. Balanchine partnered me. Everything you saw, he did with me. He lifted me. He did. And the same thing with Jerry Robbins. So it's a very, it's hard to describe it, but it's very intimate, very, sometimes a lot of fun. We could laugh with Jerry. Sometimes I could get him laughing. And, but he had a very keen sense of what he wanted, which was different than Balanchine. Sometimes, not in Dances at Gathering because it was made on me, but I know when I did The Cage, I was coached from when I was 18 till I was the last show I did. The last week I did it, he was like coaching every little finger. And there was a lot of coaching with Jerry. Once you did the first performance, he wanted it to be like that. Right. Or once he made a ballet, he wanted you to really, Dances at a Gathering, I had freedom and I could just be free and be me because he didn't want me to be anything but me. But so the process was slower and he was much more demanding than Mr. Balanchine. Mm-hmm. And he needed more time to work on things, but he was so talented that he could have opposite parts of the choreography. He would have like two different versions of something, and I was always baffled because I thought one was as good as the other. How can he pick? They all were good, But and I loved working with Jerry, and it was more dramatic, and he wanted us to do less in that dances. He didn't want you to sell it for the audience. He wanted that intimate feeling on stage, on this big, huge stage, to be as intimate as the studio. Like in Afternoon of Fawn, too, he wanted, he didn't want you overselling, or it would have to be, he'd always say to people, not to me, but he said a lot of times, less. Relax, like you do it in rehearsal. I've heard him say that to people.
I'm curious to know, I had read that about so many people learning, let's say, the wind waltz in Dances at a Gathering, that there would be like 50 different couples in the room. But what sections did you learn that you didn't end up making it on stage with, and how did that get whittled down to decide who did what?
Well, he asked me what I wanted to do, and I said, nice. I want to do everything. and then he said, because he started with Eddie and I, and then he said, oh, change your hair, go in and do what I couldn't, because I was in everything. It was like, and I was like, he took out a dance for Sally and I that it doesn't exist. We did it, I think, the first performance, and then there's a two boys dance. There was a two girls dance, and he took it out. But I was in the Grand Waltz, which I begged him to get out of because I had so much. I had like two potted of the wind. Yeah. So I got out of that, and he wasn't happy about that. But then he said, okay. And cause I had a lot, and there were other dancers who weren't doing that much in it, and I had a lot, but I loved being in it. And we felt like we love our cast, Kay and Sally and Violette and Allegra. We were the cast. And, and so we got along, and we all so different. And Sally just asked to be in it. She just wanted to see what Jerry was, and she ended up being in it. Right. Awesome. And she was I think a blue girl. She just had like a run on in the beginning, and then she got to do more and more. And of course, Violette had that fabulous solo that he did. Oh, I love that. It's a great solo. She was amazing in it. Allegra later got to do that one too, and Kay was beautiful in that, and we had a good time together. And I love my partner. I did one with Eddie and one with Anthony Blum, who was a wonderful partner. So I got the very lyrical one, which I love because I love the music. Got to do that. But
so fast forwarding to today, you are currently the Associate Artistic Director and Master Teacher at Charlotte Ballet. So what do you hope to impart on future generations of dancers as you work there or in your work when you're coming here or coaching around the country?
Well, I want them to feel confident within themselves so they can be free, so they can trust. And like Mr. Balanchine used to tell us, go for it. Don't hold back. I don't care if you fall, but just go for it. Do the maximum that you can do. You have nothing to lose by, just throwing yourself into it. Don't play it safe. Mm-hmm. And, I'd say I love staging. I work on staging for a company, for Charlotte Ballet, and we've done many of the Balanchine works, and that's my favorite thing to do, coaching and working with the dancers. Mm-hmm. And I also every year I stage a George Balanchine work for our school every year. And then in Chautauqua, Jean-Pierre has a summer course in Chautauqua, upstate New York, where our Charlotte Ballet is in residence all summer. But we have a big summer program, and I stage the Balanchine also. Mm-hmm. And I just love passing on what it's taken me so long to have learned myself, to be able to pass it on to the future dancers. And I love it. Mm-hmm. I love it because sometimes I feel like the musicality and the intent has to be there. Mm-hmm. And it's mainly the musicality and the freedom. And the energy and I know when I was very, very young, I was so lucky to have had dancers who created the role pass it on to me. Mm-hmm. It was a wonderful, experience to have their expertise. They wouldn't let me change a step, by the way. It was very, but it was wonderful, that passing on of the tradition and passing on. It's something that I just love to do. I love it because I want it to be right the way Mr. B would have wanted it. Right. And I want it to be them. I don't want them to be anybody other than themselves. Mm-hmm. I want them to be themselves. Mm-hmm. I don't want them to be me. Mm-hmm. I just want them to do the musicality, how they use their upper body. Sometimes there are little details that you feel that Mr. Balanchine would have wanted. Right. I always look at it, I hope I'm doing this right. I want to do it how I feel Mr. B would have wanted it to be passed along by. And it's such a responsibility and such a joy. I get more nervous for them when I go and if I stage something and I'm in the audience, you want them to feel good about themselves. And there's so much beauty in the younger generation. It's very extraordinary what they're doing now. All this contemporary dance, and Balanchine was all the beginning of that. And it's come even a step farther. And, the bodies are more beautiful now. They're, athletics is important, and being able to do everything full out. And Mr. B would be so happy to see all the men in dance from when he was there, because I've seen they were always such beautiful women. Every generation has had them. Mm-hmm. But to see, he imported my husband, Jean-Pierre Bonfou, and Peter Martins and Helgi Thomason at one period, because we didn't have enough. And he made these extraordinary ballets when you think, how he did Apollo and Prodigal Son and all these, he did great things for man. Mm-hmm. And now to see that a more balanced, so I think, the last time I went to see the New York City Ballet, I said, oh, what wonderful boys to match those gorgeous girls. And it's very, I feel Balanchine is still relevant in the dance world. And it teaches dancers who have never had dance, had dance that way, clarity and movement, and the technique is very special. But all the New York City Ballet, he didn't really have to show that much because we took class with him every day. So he didn't say when he's rehearsing, watch your feet or do this, or we always had to do it every single day in his classes, and they were an extension of his choreography, what he wanted. So we all knew the style because he was there giving it to us. And now that's why they have so many dancers who danced during his generation, teaching it everywhere, and to carry on his legacy is such a wonderful thing.
Well, I'm sorry. I wish we're out of time. I wish we had more time.
For 10 hours.
We could talk forever.
Well, this is such fun to reminisce.
Thank you so much for sitting down and doing this with us. It was such an honor for us and a pleasure.
It's such a joy for me, really. I love being here. It's been wonderful for me to see the company, and to work with your dancers are such a joy for me. It's great to see the young, talented people, and dancers are such special people, really.
Yeah. Well, we're excited to sit in on it tomorrow. We're going to come and peek in on.
Well, I'm an old lady, but I get so inspired, and I cry in the shows. Aww. I get so inspired, in Charlotte Ballet. I love our dancers, and I say, wow, that was so great. So I haven't tired. I'm not tired. I'm bored watching. It's still, ballet is beautiful. Still.
Conversations on Dance is part of the ACAST Creator Network. For more information, visit conversationsondancepod.com.